transports wind as well. So this question has to come up, right? Are we facing a different regime in terms of hurricane frequency? Okay, in terms of frequency, the last 10, 15 years have been an anomaly, right? But the things come up and down. So it's really hard to pinpoint whether the results, Maria and Irma, are caused by climate change, right? I don't think we need to really address that question. They happen and they will happen again. This is not the first time that Puerto Rico and the islands have been hit by a Cat 5. Okay? It's actually just listening to Eduardo now, right? This is the 5th hurricane that Puerto Rico has received as a direct hit after U.S. occupation, right? We should have learned our lessons way before this. In terms of the intensity, okay, they are growing more intense. So there's more what we call major hurricanes happening in the Caribbean, and that's a long-term trend. So what does the future hold? We don't know. We can make some predictions, right? One of the things that you need in order for the hurricane to be created is a warm ocean. So the oceans are getting warmer. So just by that fact, we expect more hurricanes and hurricanes to become more intense. But also, right, there's global patterns. Okay, the hurricane not only needs that warm ocean, but it also needs to be left alone so that, right, this is an engine that's circulating air. If you start forcing air at the very top, you knock off his head, okay, basically, right? Those are the wind shear, and then they don't get generated, okay? So the predictions suggest stronger hurricanes, okay? We're gonna get an increase in the number of the percentage of hurricanes that turn into major hurricanes, so anything above 5, category 3, sorry. But then no real increase in numbers, okay? Just because of the increased wind shear, okay? That's what we're gonna be facing in the future, and that's climate change is here. Climate change is here, okay? We don't need to think about what's going to happen, right? It's happening. We're seeing it now. Okay? Multiple impacts. I'm going to try to address the impacts on the resources based on this 4 impacts. And then, right, it's not just like an earthquake that you got the shaking, right? But you got high winds, you got a storm surge, and what else you got? Tons of rainfall. Okay, as used about that, right? Okay, with rain come floods, but also very steep topography in Puerto Rico, you get landslides. Okay, all of these processes, right? I'm a geomorphologist. All of these processes are active throughout the hurricane. Okay. The forest. What happens with the wind, right? We got Puerto Rico, we got a Cat 4. In the Virgin Islands, they got a Cat 5, 200 plus mile per hour winds. What happens to the forest, right? That's a question that people have asked. And there's been actually a couple articles already in the Anguilla talking about that. Defoliation, snapping, right? Uprooting. We know a bit, right, since we've been hit by hurricanes, especially Hurricane Hugo. A lot of people studied the effects of Hugo in forest. 10% of the trees were dead as a result, a direct result of the hurricane. Okay? But what happens? The forest is used to this. Okay? Again, just remember that graph, that initial graph that I showed you, right? The species that are there evolved with hurricanes. Okay, so they can cope with this. So they recuperate fast. What do we mean by fast? It depends on who you're talking to. Okay. Some people say a century to recover, and then this is not only visually, right? I think this quote by Ariel Lugo from the Institute of Tropical Forestry kind of says that I agree with this quote. Pasarán 10 años para que todo se vea bien. Okay, so visually, you see people in Facebook posting, right? Oh, it's there's leaves coming out of the trees, but then in terms of the functions of the forest, it's gonna take much longer. Okay, decades. Ariel Lugo said 50 years about the time, and that's the recurrence interval. That's how often we get hit by a Cat 3, a Cat 4, or a Cat 5 in Puerto Rico. Okay? And ecologists nowadays, in the past, people say, oh, the forest is damaged forever. No, scientists, ecologists recognize the cycle, recognize that this is important for what? biodiversity, which is one of the metrics that ecologists use to describe how healthy a system is. Okay, so without this, right, this is the typical forest that we're used to. When a hurricane happens, what's the distinction there? Light. Okay, so there's very opportunistic type of species that take over the space. Okay, and it's important for the long-term biodiversity of the forest. Okay, but there's critters, there's animals living in the forest. Okay, I'm going to talk about not el coquí, but I'm going to talk about the Puerto Rican parrot. Okay, an endangered species. Okay, 200 plus species left in the world. Okay, in the wild, there's about 50. Okay, not only in Ajunca, but they have already put some of these organisms out and birds out in the forest. How is it affected? They don't have anything to eat. They don't have any place to hide, or they die as a direct consequence of the high wind. What do we know about this in terms of previous research? Half of the population that's out in the wild died as a result of Hurricane Hugo in 1989. Okay, so a lot of those birds that are in the wild, we don't expect them to be able to survive the impact of Maria. What does it do to science? It destroys the places that you work. It destroys your tools. 2 examples here, not the only 2 examples that I've been exposed to in terms of my colleagues and all that. ¿Dónde es esto, Juan y Bucci? Where is that?
Facundo West.
Facundo West on Expo. That's the Coastal Geomorphology Lab. Professora Marisa Barreto, some of you here I know her. She waited like 10 years to get this thing going. She opened this lab like, I don't know, 8 months ago. Okay? She was able to take a lot of the equipment out of it. On the right, you can see, right, that building there is the Marine Sciences Institute, Environmental Science Institute of the University of the Virgin Islands in St. Thomas. Okay, so they lost the roof, as you can see there. Storm surge, a lot of beach erosion, right? Why do we care about that? Beaches are a big attraction to the islands. Okay, a lot of the economy in the islands is driven by the beauty that the beaches offer. Okay, tourism 4.5.